Saturday again, Buffer Timers, because here we are talking about Picard Season 3, Episode 4. We're going to go around the order clockwise and introduce ourselves. I'm Dustin from Best of Trek, Worst of Trek.
I am Scott from the YouTube channel Opinions No One Cares About, and not just some dipshit from Chicago.
I'm Eve from the USS Lilith and the CNC of Starfleet Canada.
Not to try to outdo her, but my name is Dell, and I'm the CNC of my own apartment.
Wonderful.
Love it.
Captain of your destiny.
Yes. However
Now
small they may be.
Now I'm going to turn this over to the wonderful Dell, and he's going to ask us some questions.
Scott's looking very Gene today when you did that.
We have a ton of questions. So I will try to keep us to time as much as possible. So please don't get mad at me if I cut you off or tell you that you've taken enough time.
Right.
And we're not going to have a cat suit conversation this week. Those are the rules. All right. So one of the first things that we learn in the episode is that Picard had an interaction with the Hirogen in the Alpha Quadrant. What do you think happened?
I think they were pissed that that Voyager destroyed their relay network, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
came for retribution.
I would say, too, a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit of it might be expanding their hunting grounds because we know they're fairly nomadic because it suits their lifestyle of chasing prey. And to them, the Alpha Quadrant would provide, all sorts of new and interesting prey.
I don't know the distance of it all, but
Yeah.
how long would it take them to get from the Delta Quadrant to the Alpha Quadrant? Because I feel like if that's longer than a couple of months, then we may have a continuity error.
Just a little bit. I was wondering about that with the timeline because
Yeah.
Picard clearly faced him while he was in Starfleet. But how long has he been retired?
Maybe a wormhole?
Maybe. Or some other magical transportation device.
Because,
Let's
we
see.
had Ferengi in the Delta Quadrant because of a random wormhole.
True.
The 5 years ago would be right at the end of the 24th century. So, and we know Picard was, the last time we saw him in Nemesis was in the early 2380s. So, it's somewhere within about a 15-year period.
They could have come
But
across new
but
technology.
Voyager got home about 5 or 6 years before that, before Nemesis. So,
Right.
there's time, I think.
Okay. I wasn't sure, but I was just like, that sounds like a long way to go, like time-wise.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they found a subspace corridor or those the courier tunnels that we learn about in from Book in Discovery.
Or they've discovered
Oh, yeah.
transwarp conduit technology or, technobabble solution here.
Either way, I can't see them turning down a chance to exploit new hunting grounds. They'd love to go head to head with a Cardassian or something
yeah.
that can fight
Oh,
them.
yeah.
So.
So one of the other things that comes up in the stories that Picard talks about to the cadets, which we will cover in a minute, he refers to Worf as being a lieutenant commander. And
True.
does that date when that story happens? Like, does he still identify as a lieutenant commander, or has he been promoted since then? And if so, what do you think happened? Or did he not progress because of what happened with Jadzia?
Yeah, I think that's just it. I think he got capped at lieutenant commander and never went any proper higher, because then he becomes the ambassador to the Klingon High Council for the Federation, and then for some reason comes back to Starfleet, and we know in Nemesis.
Maybe it could be a little column A, little column B. Like partly he got, throttled for what happened with Jadzia, but
Right.
at the same time, he's, when he became an ambassador, he wasn't being Starfleet officer per se. So that to him could have been his leave of absence, and then he returned because I could see him
That's
taking
the
on the
thing.
ambassador role as a way to get away from the fleet for a bit because of Jadzia.
I could see that.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, how many of us, like, if we lost a spouse or partner, would be like, I need a leave of absence, you know?
Heck, I did one after a breakup. I was like, I'm not coming in for a week. My boyfriend dumped me.
Uh-huh.
It worked. I had a female boss who was using the office to sell her Mary Kay, so I had enough dirt. But anyway,
Very Ferengi.
yes, there's parts of me. I'm like a Betazoid Ferengi crossover.
No, I meant your boss.
Because I even have the big ears. But
No, I meant your boss. Exploitation begins in the workplace.
Exploitation
do you
begins at
think?
home.
That
Oh
too.
yeah. Do you think that Picard having a hard time talking to the cadets is because it goes against what he wants the least, or goes for what he wants the least, was just to be considered a legend? Do you think that could have played into why he wasn't really interested in interacting with them at first?
He's never
think
had
that's-
patience for young fleet officers.
Yeah.
I think it's just Picard being Picard. I mean, he generally doesn't like getting outside his comfort zone, and especially not when he's trying to eat his fish and chips. Leave the man
Right.
alone.
Yeah. He's never
just-
been one
go
to
ahead.
puff his chest. Like, he's not the type of like chest puffing captain that we sometimes get like Kirk, where they're happy to talk about how wonderful they are. He's
That's
really not like that. But he never had patience with younger people, like younger fleet officers and stuff like that.
The one reason why I was thinking about that connection is because it feels like one of the, I don't know what the word is, but one of the running subtexts of this episode was about telling your story, you being the one that tells your story, and how important that is for other people to understand where you're coming from. And I think we see that in multiple situations over the course of the episode. So I thought that was something worth talking about. Especially because I think in this particular instance, I think one of the reasons Picard starts to open up is because he wants to be the one that partakes, that passes on the lessons that he learned from an adventure, not just the adventure itself.
You're making me think of the Millennium Gate episode of Voyager, where
Not
Janeway,
my favorite, but I understand where you're coming from.
yeah, where Janeway remembers her own history wrong because it's been passed down wrong.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Scott, if that's a spoiler.
That happened to be in 11:59 because that's the next episode I need to watch.
Yes, it is.
Damn it.
Sorry.
Well, you're
It's
not
okay.
missing much anyway. Good
It's
luck.
been out- to be fair, it's been out for like 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not a question, but it's a comment. Did you guys notice that we're starting to get the names of the bridge officers now?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
It's starting to
Well, I
feel like
watched the
this good.
subtitles, so I already was. I'm just kind of trying to get match them to the right faces.
Right. But it's I think it's the first time they've been referred to by name.
Basically, yeah.
Except for Sydney.
right.
Forge. Yeah.
Well, when Shaw was back when he was still in the command, he's like, you, and you know, go take a break. We're gonna be here for a while.
It reminds me that RuPaul does not know all of the people who have won his show. He doesn't know all of their names.
Oh wow.
And yet I can remember the name of every student I've ever taught when I'm flipping back pictures going back almost 17 years now.
Wow.
The ones I can remember off the top of my head were either the ones that were really good or really awful. But if I look at the pictures going back, I can remember every single kid in every single photo.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this particular thing was a revelation for all of us because we'd been talking about it. You can actually see the bridge for like 20 seconds.
Right?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, and literally
Yeah.
I had the visceral reaction of, oh, that's what it looks like.
That's why I shared that meme I found where it's like they're asking him, why is your bridge so dark? And he's like, well, after the beige disaster of like TNG and this, this bridge and that bridge. And then he's like, you tell us, Picard, you're the expert on lighting.
I will take the beige 80s love boat 10 times out of 10 over this dark AF bridge.
I would even take like the Enterprise or Voyager bridges that are gray over this one.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Defiant. Like it still has a dark feel to it, and
Little bit, yeah.
it isn't a Holiday Inn in the sky.
Right.
You can still see it. Like you wouldn't be stumbling around like blind.
Another kind of weird thing that happened in this show is they were reusing a lot of sound effects that come from other shows. So one of them was the door chime. It was the same door chime they used in TNG.
And TOS even.
Oh, yeah, and TOS. And then
I remember that.
Yeah.
And then the bosun's call. I mean, that's been kind of the same all along because it is a bosun's call, but it does kind of tie into the same bosun's call that they've used on the other series. But I noticed a noise, and I don't know personally if this is historic or not. When they deactivate their shields, there's an audible noise on the bridge that's like,
Oh, yeah.
Does that happen before, or am I crazy? Is this the first time?
I don't
If
recall.
it does, it's in a movie.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's not ringing a bell.
Yeah, it's not ringing a bell, at least shows-wise.
Yeah.
I can't recall them ever having it. Maybe it's
I
a
feel
new
like we
thing.
might have heard it in one of the movies, but I can't place it. Speaking of just random comments and things we noticed, did anybody else notice and think of when they would call for the arch and exit the 10 forward simulation? The exit sign just over it, did that remind anybody else of another callback to Wrath of Khan coming out of the Kobayashi Maru simulator in this episode? That's yet another callback to the Kobayashi Maru?
Oh, yeah, no win scenario.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I guess I'm the only one.
Yeah.
That's all right.
So the next point I wanted to make was more about our terminology, because I'm very attached to a specific character. So I have decided that Ensign Foster is a corpse and Shifty is a changeling. I just wanted to make that delineation. Let's get into Shaw.
Yeah.
Because I think we saw a lot of character development and growth in Shaw. And I think we finally realized, and I think he even finally realized, that being a bag of dicks is not going to get him exactly where he wants to go. And that he has to get over his trauma, if he can at this point, in order to move forward. How did you guys feel about Shaw in this episode?
I love him. It reaffirmed all of the things that have been building up and I've been really liking. The first time we ever saw Shaw, I knew that one of two things, or maybe simultaneously both, were going to be true. That either he's going to be part of the soulless minions of Orthodoxy, or he's going to be a redemption arc that we get to see built up episode over episode. And so far we're getting that, but we still might find out in the end that he's playing a really long con.
I think it's interesting that it parallels Cisco in his interactions with Picard, because I mean, Cisco went through the same thing. He lost his wife, he lost his child, almost lost his child at Wolf 359. And the fact that, everybody who comes across Picard who was in that battle blames him, even though technically it wasn't his fault. And I have to admit, Picard's reaction, when Jacksident, and that's his name, he's the Jacksident, when Jacksident steps in and he's just trying to tell him, like, calm down, and Picard goes, no, it's okay, and that's when he leaves. It kind of gives the sense that Picard's had to go through this conversation dozens of times with dozens of people going, well, I first met you at Wolf 359.
Yep.
So the fact that he's just kind of resigned himself to that. Like that's going to be part of who he is forever.
Right.
But I do like that Shaw actually has a reason for being a bag of dicks, at least.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he is capable. And he does, look out for his crew. And I mean, yeah, if any of us was at Wolf 359, we'd probably hate Picard too.
Although I'm getting a little tired of the whole a captain from a ship meets Picard and yells at him for being Locutus.
That part, the Locutus part, bothered me this time because Shaw said that he was given the name because he was the most deadly, but that's not why he was given the name.
No.
He was given the name because the Borg Queen wanted an equal.
Well, yeah, but Shaw wouldn't know that.
Yeah, I know, but that's just interesting that he's, thinks he was so deadly. I mean, Picard actually didn't really do much when you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really wish if they were going to do this again, like with Cisco, that they'd shifted it to the next Borg incident at least, and had this be, this was what happened during First Contact.
Right.
Wolf 359's become kind of like their go-to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We need trauma, Wolf 359. We need trauma, Wolf 359.
Speaking of dealing with trauma, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Because of a certain line of dialogue, does Shaw smoke pot?
Oh, right.
I would say definitely.
Yeah.
There's no way with those lines that he does.
He would have to, or he's going to have an aneurysm the way that guy's so high.
I just feel like his reaction, the fact that Seven came back with, cannabis.
Pot, you don't mean cannabis? No.
Yeah, and then Shaw just being like, I wish. That's when I was like, oh my God, he smokes pot.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the only way the line would make sense, because otherwise, why would Seven of Nine bring up something like that? She would take the word pot to mean a literal pot.
Yeah.
True.
And I mean, we know Raffi loves her space weed, so.
Mm-hmm.
I know that this has been brought up in other podcasts, but I still want to bring it up anyway.
Okay.
The bucket. It's Bucketgate.
Oh my God.
So, Odo's bucket was a present from Dr. Mora and has a Bajoran design.
Okay.
It did not come in his goo baby bassinet.
He was found in a jar.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how come now other changelings are carrying around Bajoran themed buckets so that they can leave residue in?
Maybe some enterprising Ferengi?
Maybe. I mean, first I was trying to explain it away by going, well, they have the image in the on the pad, so maybe it has developed since then, or if that's just a picture of Odo's bucket.
I find it a lot less egregious than how some of this stuff with the shapeshifters has happened in the past.
Right.
Mainly because Odo has already gone back to the Great Link. It's been a bunch of years. Maybe it became, like a thing after he went back. Like, oh, hey, when we're out away from the link, this is what we chill in.
Right.
But early on, it was like, Dr. Moira is why Odo has the hair he has. Why do all shapeshifters have the same hair? The bucket doesn't bother me.
It's the one haircut per species rule.
Mm-hmm.
That's just it.
Except now we have a bald Vulcan.
I felt queasy with now the fact that instead of being like golden goo, they look more like raw meat.
That was weird.
That I was like, oh, it looks like raw bacon, like slithering through.
I do not like the new render.
Nope. I totally get updating the T-1000 special effect from 30 years ago, but this ain't it. Not for me.
It looks like
you designing Klingons.
Guys have ever seen the pink extruded meat thing?
Yep.
That's what it reminded me of if there was fat still in it.
Oh, yeah.
It was pretty gross. I have another Odo-related question, and it's short, so then we can move on to a different topic. But I happen to be a changeling nut. With Starfleet Intelligence, Starfleet Medical, the Daystrom Institute, other things. Why are we still calling it goo? I mean, we could call it like a refractory substance or even changeling viscera, which would sound slightly more technobabbly than
Yeah,
goo.
but for Shaw, it made sense that Shaw would just call them, Clay-Doh.
That I
Oh,
like.
yeah, right?
I just thought that was, I just think that's an interesting, I mean, I'm sure they kept it because goo is a funny word.
Yeah.
Well, that Odo sometimes referred to it as goo.
That's true. But it was just like, in an official capacity, I feel like they should have a better word. I don't know. Let's go back. Let's see, where are we? Sorry, someone tell a joke for a second. That's usually my job.
I'll
My
ask the
face is a
question,
joke.
do we... Eve the Evie.
Yeah.
Do we think the space jellies that are birthed at the end of this thing are the space jellyfish from the end of Encounter at Farpoint?
That's what I thought. Even my husband, who doesn't watch Star Trek, is like, "Oh, look, it's Farpoint babies."
Yeah.
I think they are.
They reference
I don't think they were. I don't
They
think
look
the
a little
art was
different, but-
necessarily identical, but I could see like the
Thank
reference.
Right.
The only other thing I can think of is like caretaker species.
Though they were said to be from outside the galaxy, but
Yeah, but we don't know if they've come
No.
back.
it's entirely possible.
But to me, they look like Farpoint babies.
Yeah. Maybe a little different, but, space genetics.
Yeah, I think where Picard even dropped the fact, oh, this is like what happened at Farpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be.
So rewinding back in the episode a little bit, Riker tells Seven that she should continue to investigate the changeling thing, but do it on the down low. Is this because Riker has a history of jumping the gun and trying to investigate something before he talks to Picard about it? It's usually investigations and not away missions. It's more like he will start asking questions and bringing in suspects before he even tells Picard like what's going on. So I feel like that's echoed in him talking to Seven about being stealth while looking for the changeling.
I think he suspects there's some kind of conspiracy, your favorite word, Del.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, how did this changeling get away with being around for so long and nobody noticed?
Right.
Because because a changeling as an officer, like every 16 hours, they have to reliquefy and stuff like that. You'd think somebody would have noticed something by now, especially because they get like medical scans all the time when they're on a ship. I mean, you had Crusher trying to get Picard in for his physical how many times?
Yeah, right.
And that's how they found Seska too.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's probably thinking, somebody's hiding something. So it's best to have somebody not out in the open investigating, if that makes sense. Like the only way to flesh out a conspiracy is to have somebody in the shadows.
Right.
Right.
Because Riker was there for the actual conspiracy.
Right. And I definitely, I felt overtones of that episode, but there's another episode that I feel like has more of overtones to it, but we'll talk about that later. I'm trying to stay mostly chronological, so it's easy to follow along. I've jumped around a little bit. I feel like one of the moving moments for me was this little tiny thing that happened. Well, not a tiny thing that happened, but it wasn't a big like plot point, was when they knew they were going to die and that things were dire. Picard chooses to go and talk to his son rather than remain on the bridge and try to solve the problem. Do we think that's growth? Or is he just reacting to what he's been told?
Oh.
Well, he's always had a passing curiosity with family, even though he hasn't been into it.
Yeah.
So when Riker comes and his most trusted friend, even though he just threw him off the bridge, and probably rightly so, coming to him and telling him, hey, look, I don't need an apology. You fucked up, but go talk to your kid for 5 minutes. And he took that to heart.
I think if it had come from anyone other than Riker, he wouldn't have done it. because he
The
knows,
crew.
because he's seen the impact that the loss of Riker's son has had on his like family and his marriage and everything else. I mean, we find out that that's the whole reason why, you know, he's away from Troy right now, is because the death that he couldn't handle the death of their son. So I think if it was anyone but Riker, it wouldn't have made sense. But because it's Riker, it makes sense.
We're talking
Is that
about
what's happening
Riker.
there?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just looking at Cambodge. Like, is that what's happening there?
They're
Who
polkaing.
knows in this episode?
They're wearing polka dot. No, I'm kidding.
It
I
could
felt
be
like
too
this
warm
episode was a
under
lot
there. I
of
don't
creative
know.
interpretation of what was on the screen. I had to turn my screen up to the brightness all the way, which made
Shut-
that 20 seconds of being able to see the bridge so much brighter. Talking about Riker, how do we feel about the depiction of Riker as captain?
I mean, I think he makes a good captain. He's, hey, you didn't actually see him. You know, I mean, he starts there on the bridge. He's getting all the information, taking recommendations from the crew. It's really kind of making me wish we had like a Star Trek Titan show, to be honest. I would like to see that.
You can tell age has definitely tempered him, though, because when we see him in Lower Decks, he's all, you know, Yahoo! Space cowboy! Let me just dive right in there. You know, you see him when he's younger as the Titan captain being like that. But now that he's older and, you know, you see that he's a lot more tempered. He's a lot less impulsive, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And even Picard points out he's a little bit more cautious and hesitant to do things. He's less of a risk taker, which I think in a way is a good thing. But I mean, him not wanting to take risks, I hope they don't push that too much, because otherwise that wouldn't be Riker. He's always been a little bit of a risk taker. I mean, he doesn't have to be, you know, Mr. Yahoo, like ride him cowboy, but...
Yeah, I was just about to talk Riker up and be like, man, in just an episode and a half, we've seen like some of the best captain moments out of him. He is grade A Starfleet material. But
oh yeah,
some of what you were just saying, it throws some shade on him. I kind of lost my train of thought here.
Here's some shade.
Ooh.
You were going to talk Riker up, and then I said...
It was something you were saying, and I lost it. I'm sorry.
You went with a butt.
Right,
Right, we will come back to your butt later. You're going to regret asking me to host.
Dell, if you're ever in Canada, you come hang out with my friends. You'll fit right in.
All right. I have it in my notes. I'm going to bring it up just because I thought it was another one of those very small, hilarious moments. Don't come. Don't come. No, really,
First thing in my
come.
notes was, I bet he says that a lot to himself.
Or
it's a positive affirmation for Shaw.
Or he personalized his his computer to recognize "don't come" as mean "don't open the door."
Either that, or
He
yeah,
had to make the distinction.
Either that, or he, you know, he's learned, unlike Geordi, to erase his browser history.
Ooh.
Captain Shaw, edgelord.
That's a side of him I don't want to think about.
Speaking of Shaw, I did like the scene between Seven and Shaw a lot. And I think it was interesting and a good fleshing out of the character that Seven actually says, Shaw, you have good qualities. You have a good quality that could be used right now.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting you go do the thing you're really good at. And I think that may be one of the reasons why he's seeing her more as a leader.
I loved that moment at the end.
Yeah, right?
That is
and you'd say that
we're-
even, if you'd say that even if you weren't a changeling and not just a dick.
That's what I thought too, is that, you know, that's his real feelings about her, but he doesn't want to say it, of course, because he wants to, you know, keep his dick image.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Seven has always been like the one thing she does. One of the things she always has been is about efficiency and people being used where they're best. So even if she doesn't like somebody, even on Voyager, if she didn't like working with somebody, if she knew they had some expertise that she needed, she had no problem being like, "You come with me. I need this."
Yep.
Yeah.
So she would recognize a capable leader. I mean, because she had to see Janeway deal with some of the worst that the Quadrant could throw at her. There's a comment in the public comments there, Del.
I don't know
Oh,
how to
I
make
got it.
that work.
I got it. I got it.
Okay.
Quick lid.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up when we got to Vatic too.
Hated the Picard F-bomb. Yeah, me too. It didn't fit in his mouth.
That was
Right?
another
Oh,
thing I was
swears
gonna,
now. Okay.
Yeah, no, there was much more obscenities in this episode than I think I've ever heard in Trek before.
Like, I could see Jackson swearing, but Picard doesn't swear.
I just thought it was another one of those nostalgia pieces calling back to the movies, colorful metaphors.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that thing about Jack, like, they threw in another one of his random Britishisms when they're going through the whole thing. He's like, Bob's your uncle, Fanny's John. I was like, really? We're doing this?
I was like, okay, how British are we making this guy?
Right.
I mean, you can make him sound like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins if you really want to get stereotypical.
Don't do that.
Well, for me, the weird thing is the second half of the current season of You just dropped, and he plays a psychopath in that show. Like, the actor who plays Jacksident plays a psychopath in You. And so I'm seeing a lot of parallels between them. So for me, when he first showed up on the screen in Picard, I'm like, okay, I already hate this guy in the other show because he's good at making me hate him. I'm going to hate him again. Except now I spend half my time wondering who he's going to frame for murder now.
Right.
It's the problem when you have two shows running concurrently with the same dude in them.
I just wanted to make a weird comment. I'm going to go back to the scene in 10 Forward for a moment, because there was just a lot to deconstruct in that scene. Picard says, "This is a place with real significance to me." And my reaction was, no, it isn't. It's a set that you built that cost you a bunch of money, and you're going to reuse it every chance you get this season. Did anyone else get that sort of feeling? Like, why are we doing this in the holodeck?
Every time they keep coming back to it, it just feels like, oh, hey, this was a set that we paid for with last year's budget, and now we get to reuse to throw in some filler shots.
Right.
They're going to have to get their money's worth out of it.
Mm-hmm. They're taking way too much to recreate the actual 10 Forward from the D.
Yeah, that would have been a set with some significance. I mean, for God's sake, Enterprise recreated it for their final episode, and that sucked.
Right?
I mean, even like on Voyager, Tom's bar was in the holodeck was more, what you expect, not this. This feels too nightclubish. The dark lighting.
Well, it fits right in with the show.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't throw the tiki bar from Voyager in.
How do you feel about the fact that it's been revealed that the holodeck has its own power source? Is it now a mental health treatment facility?
Barclay sure used it as one.
Yeah, it's better than what it's mostly used for.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty much all people use it for.
Yeah. I mean, Deep Space Nine at least got that right. TNG is, you could go on an adventure. You could surf in Hawaii. You could see other worlds. Deep Space Nine is welcome to Quarks. We've got Klingon double fisting pleasure for you to watch.
Wow.
Catsuit.
Actually, there's a meme about it. I'm quoting an actual meme. It's like the Bender one where he says, "I'll build my own Star Trek with blackjack and hookers," and then you see Deep Space Nine. I mean, Deep Space Nine was honest, at least, about what would happen.
Not wrong. Yeah. If you create a new technology, people will find a way to use it for that.
Rule 34. And then if that doesn't apply, Rule 35.
So that everyone who's watching understands, we have decided that our code word for we're getting off topic or we need to get back to the topic is catsuit, because notoriously in one of our episodes we went on about catsuits a lot longer than we should have.
Still waiting for Scott to slip into one.
No.
He was the one who said I said you guys wouldn't wear one, and he said you don't know me, so I'm still waiting.
I hung that up long ago.
I'll find you one, Scott.
Anyway,
again, questions about these little tiny moments because they always stand out to me. The joke question was, does Jack turn down the wine because it isn't of a 2309 vintage? Okay, at least someone got the joke. I thought it might be too scary.
There is no finer vintage.
I know. Or is it a symbolic of a refusal of, I don't want any more Picard in me than I already have?
Oh, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Okay.
I took it as it wouldn't fit with his character to be much of a wine drinker. His personality, he's definitely the kind of guy who rolls up to the bar and says, give me something hard, something cheap, and something to get me drunk.
But, I mean, I'm a martini drinker.
Booze, why would you ask for cheap booze?
Well, yeah, that was my next question. Was like, why?
I laughed at it, like Jameson.
Right?
You know, booze and Jameson. I'm like, okay, I hope Jameson wasn't paying for that kind of promotion.
Yeah, that was strange. I'm a martini drinker, and if someone said, I made this wine, I would drink it. Or at least I would have a sample. So that just seemed weird to me.
Right.
He's also worried. Jack is also worried about how much the shot would cost. And that made me scratch my head like this, because we're in the holodeck and we're in a place where it's cashless.
I'm about to die. Give me some top shelf.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know some people who prefer well drinks to call drinks, but still,
sure,
it seems a little weird to say, give me the crappiest thing you've got back there. Although whiskey is not the crappiest drink. I will admit that.
No.
It reminded me a little bit of Scotty as well when he was on TNG, and he's like, you know, he gets his first taste of synthahol, and he's like, I've been drinking scotch since, forever, and that's not scotch. And then later he gets the bottle from Picard, or from Guinan, and
from Data.
From Data, yeah, because it was behind the bar, and he gets his bottle, and then he meets up with Picard, and he goes, it's green. And Picard's like, it's Saurian brandy. Who do you think gave it to Guinan? Like,
no, it's all Devrim whiskey.
Oh, is it?
I was expecting the Saurian brandy to come out when this episode, when Jack asked for a well drink. I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be Saurian brandy. Really, JMO's? What?
Right.
That was weird.
Well,
because you'd think the vintage would be crazy by then.
Maybe somebody on the crew doesn't like Jameson.
So, in this scene, we cut back to Seven talking about a changeling, and I've gone back and forth about this moment because, at least on Voyager, it seemed like Seven had an eidetic memory of every species, what their species number was, and some basic traits of that species. But she claims to have no knowledge of changelings.
Because the Borg don't have knowledge of anything they can't assimilate. That was actually stated in Voyager a couple times. If they haven't assimilated it, they can't understand it. That's why they couldn't defeat species 8472, because they couldn't assimilate them. Right. And changelings, to me, like, I've always figured, because they're not, I won't say they're corporeal, but because they're like gelatinous, they could be one of those species that is impervious to Borg, like Borg assimilation. Because Seven said many times, if they can't assimilate it, they can't understand it. That's the only way they know.
Yeah.
Or more than that, the majority of them are in one place in the Great Link. They're not out
Yeah.
ship to ship and getting assimilated by cubes. It's the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta that have probably been
Oh, yeah.
assimilated, just
Most
not the
likely.
changeling up to now.
Yeah, and they're in the their gamma quadrant base too. And I mean, their planet's a rogue planet, which means it doesn't have a fixed orbit or
Well, it
fixed location.
was. We don't know where it is now.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a reason why she wouldn't. I mean, if she just said right away all these things about changelings, it would have been like, that wouldn't make sense.
All right. So at this point, Vadik shows up again. Was that a Klingon dagger? I couldn't get anyone who said specifically yes or
No,
no.
it's a Romulan dagger.
Is it?
It's from Nemesis. It's the same. It's the same one that Shinzon uses to try to kill Picard towards the end of Nemesis.
Right.
This is part of the reason I'm still getting serious Romulan vibes from Vadic's side of things.
It just looked familiar to me, and I didn't know what alien race it was, and I didn't come up with a definitive answer. So, like, I looked around, and no one said it is this. So,
if it was Shinzon holding it, though, it could have been Riemann, which is the sister species to the Romulans.
Yeah, Romulan or Riemann.
Yeah, and that Riemann stuff does tend to look a little bit like Klingon stuff.
Yeah.
So the face that she conjures, I am going to nickname the magic mirror head because it reminded me of the magic mirror from Snow White. Like using puzzles, but in an evil way, and demanding them to do something that's obviously against their better interests. So anyway, is he related to the founders, and how?
I thought of him as an evil face of Bo, but that's just like
nice.
Yeah, I really don't know where they're going with this. Clearly, he has something to do with the changelings because he's that same weird meat stuff. But is it just a conduit to them to talk to them? Is it its own little entity?
And why does Vadik have to basically cut off her hand to do it?
I actually don't think Vadik has a hand. Like, well, I mean, I don't think Vadik actually has a hand. Like, that's what it is, like, changeling based, and it's how they can communicate with her. Because if it was just a changeling, like, they would know what was going on.
Yeah, because I thought it was just weird that she has to basically cut it off to.
Yeah, that's true.
Conjure it. I mean, we've seen. Go ahead, Del. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say I've heard a bunch of different conspiracies because conspiracies. If I ever start a Trek channel, that word will be in the title. What was I talking? Conspiracies. Back up. What were you talking about, Eve?
Vadic's hand.
Oh, I've heard theories from she is a changeling all the way down to that has nothing to do with changelings. So that's why I was kind of curious as to where you fall on that spectrum. So let's say not a changeling as 1 and a full changeling as 10. Where do you think she lies?
Hybrid.
Somewhere in the middle?
Yeah. I'm thinking maybe a hybrid of some kind. I mean, there's also the possibility of 8472 as well.
I'm thinking maybe she's genetically created by the changeling, similar to the Vorta or the Jem'Hadar.
Okay.
That would make sense because the Jem'Hadar were completely genetically created and the Vorta were just genetically enhanced and cloned.
Right.
Which, if she's involved with that, could there be more Vadics out there now?
That's why I say similar to. I don't think she's like a clone or like in a line of clones like Weyoun, but created. Maybe.
What?
I'm thinking maybe hybrid. All of her little minions of orthodoxy, though. I think they're probably all the same and created as a clone.
Why does he not care if the Shrike gets destroyed and Vadik dies?
Yeah, I thought that too. Like,
then their
mission isn't going to be successful anyway if she and the ship are destroyed.
Well, yeah, and there's a portal weapon. Like, why would you want to sacrifice a portal weapon for getting one guy? Like, what is so important about Jacksident that you would sacrifice the damn portal weapon?
Because we already know the portal weapon is just a distraction.
Yeah.
There's something much bigger. They don't really care about that.
Yeah, they seem to care a lot about Jack, though. But, like, I think it was actually Shaw that was saying that Changeling was on board the Titan long before Beverly and Jack were. So there's clearly something a lot bigger going on.
Here's the thing I think there. It's Seven, I think, that says,
Yeah,
this changeling's
been.
been on board since before Riker and them came aboard. But I don't think it was for very long. I think it's the same creepy dude that we saw in the bar listening to their conversation in the very first episode.
Right.
And then he
Right.
gets to the Titan ahead of them, takes out Ensign Shifty, takes over his life, and he's there just ahead of Riker and Picard. That's my thought.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, that actually does.
So I'm going to break my own rule of hating when they use the title as part of the dialogue, which they did in this episode again.
Yeah.
Why, if we know or we think at this point in the episode that the gravity well is a no-win scenario, or at least at that point in the show, why... I just the order to follow no matter what, like no matter if it kills you, I don't care, seems weird to me. Like I would want my asset to stay alive. Especially if they had like an awesome weapon that could change the course of history.
That's why there's got to be somebody bigger above Vadic and something bigger going on, because I mean, the only time we've ever seen something where they were willing to let an asset be destroyed is when there's something even more important than the asset. Otherwise, yeah, it's not adding up, because one little, Mr. Accidental hookup can't be that important otherwise.
Right.
And what good does it do if they get him but destroy themselves in the process?
Exactly.
Do you think they treat her like poop because she's a solid?
Oh.
Could be.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, if we rule her out as a changeling, then it brings up a lot of questions as to why, if the magic mirror head is a changeling device, which it looks like it is because they use the same effect, like I could see like a founder. We'll be really specific. I can see a founder telling a solid, "Yeah, go, keep going until you self-delete."
Well, they were willing to do that with Ducat essentially, and then later Damar.
Yep.
I mean, that's why Damar had a drinking problem at the end of DS9, was he knew, his days were numbered, but there was nothing he could do, and he knew he was expendable. That's why he was drinking so much.
Yeah.
I mean, that last season, you never see him without a drink.
Well, at least until Kira comes along.
So this also brings up, from like arguing in my own head, my argument was like, does she really think she's trapped? Because I mean, she was like overjoyed about playing hide and seek in the nebula. Like she thought that was going to be great fun. But now that she's caught in the gravity well, now she's concerned. I just feel like the concern might have been, I don't know. I don't want to say part of the trap, but it seems weird to me. Like it clicked my conspiracy brain.
Maybe she realized she overplayed her hand.
Yeah.
I mean, if we go with Dustin's idea of the mustache twirling villain, how many mustache twirling villains are arrogant up until they realize they've overplayed their hand?
Yep.
I thought she had already realized that. I thought that had already come when the magic mirror thing came out. But clearly it didn't, because she's just babbling and twirling in her friggin' chair while they're throwing an asteroid at her.
That's why I'm going back to the mustache twirling villain, because it just doesn't make sense. Like,
I mean, I love the way Amanda Plummer is playing this. Love it. But it's written so goddamn one-dimensionally.
Like anytime she expresses emotion other than like evil or angry, it looks out of place. Like it stands out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Jumping back I know that I'm trying to do this in chronological order, but the episode isn't
It's
in chronological order.
Yeah, right.
So randomly, we cut back to Picard talking to the cadets, and he brings up the Temerians from the episode Darmok.
Yeah.
And what hit me about that was that the whole story of the Temerians is that they tell stories to communicate, or they make references to mythology in order to communicate. And one of the
Fire planet, but
running themes of this episode seems to be one of the best ways to communicate what you're thinking and feeling is to share your own story. So I just felt like that was an interesting situation for Picard to bring up randomly to the cadets. Another weird Dell conspiracy theory, and then I'll get back to the real questions. Do you think that the scene with the cadets leaves a tiny crack in the door so that you can still see light from the hallway for a Starfleet Academy cameo?
You mean this season, or?
No, I mean, so he's talking with the cadets, and the cadets are completely absorbed in what he's saying. And so one of my thoughts was, if they're really making a Starfleet Academy show, I mean, that would be a guest spot for Picard right there, was to come and just tell some stories. I mean, Patrick Stewart could sit in a chair for the whole scene. He just needs to be an old man babbling about what happened 20 years ago or 20 years ago, whatever. I'll bring that up later. Sorry. I'm laughing at my own notes now.
It looks like you're laughing at something invisible from over here, so.
Yeah, because I actually take notes with a pen and paper, so I have this to work with.
Okay.
Look on your face. We got Dustin doing Gowron eyes every time he's surprised, and we've got Scott going what the?
Glory.
In 10 Forward, when Jack and Picard are talking, do you think that Jack's position on Picard could be influenced by the fact that he's supposed to be 22? And the reason I bring that up is because at 22, you tend to be a lot more narcissistic than you are at 32. And so he's worried about what he is, or what Picard thinks he's getting from these conversations, but he's not at all considering that Picard might need this and that he should sit down and just let Picard have his moment.
Well, he still sees Picard as more his adversary still almost. And I have to wonder if it's, a little bit of jealousy too, that he knows. I mean, it's obvious Picard still has feelings for his mother. Whether she has those feelings for him anymore is hard to say, but I'd have to say he still sees Picard as being his adversary, that would influence him more. Plus, let's face it, 22-year-old young man, far too much testosterone, not enough, stopping and thinking.
Yeah.
No offense to some of the present company.
No, that sounds about right.
Definitely depend on the age, as you put it. Because as somebody that has never met their father, I know I would not give half a fig what my actual father thinks if we sat down to have a drink. As far as his own feelings and needs. At 22, I might have been more respectful of it and been like, wow, I want to meet my dad. But now at closer to 42, I'm just going to go, whatever. That's just how I do it.
You're turning into Shaw, whatever.
Yeah.
I love that. Whatever.
No, what doesn't say makes sense, because I have a few friends that, they've never met their dad or whatever, and they're at the point now where they're like, if he were to show up on my door, I'd be like, screw you, go away.
So the other thing that happened while the scene was being shot was when it switched from Jack telling his story and Picard listening to Jack listening to Picard. They also switched positions at the bar.
Yeah.
Jack is the bartender while Picard is talking, and Picard is the bartender while Jack is talking. And I'm wondering if that was a purposeful choice to do
Almost
that, to sort of depersonalize, like it's no longer a father and son, it's now a patron talking to a bartender.
That would fit with
Yeah.
like in The Cage, where the doctor brings in drinks and he says to Pike, you know, people will tell their bartender something they won't tell, you know, their doctor or whatever. And I mean, think of all the times it was Guinan that people were spilling their guts to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's true. People will tell things to their bartender that they wouldn't tell anyone else.
What do you guys think about the Jack Crusher Sr. story, the little bits that we heard of that?
Loving it.
I
Anything about
You guys
Jack,
were gonna say
Jack
that.
Crusher and the Lost Era, I
Yep.
am so for it.
I like it too because the fact that it implies that Jack Crusher was impulsive when he was younger, we can see why Wesley might have been.
This is true.
You know, that Wesley had more of his father's influence in him than he did his mother's.
Yeah, a friend had brought up that it's kind of weird that like Riker and other people know this story, but this kid that has nothing but secondhand stories from his mom doesn't know this one. But I didn't see it like that at all, because I don't think Jack would have ever told this story to Beverly, because clearly it was about another woman and some other stuff that happened. Just because Riker knows, that kind of makes a little more sense.
Well, it's because it's the kind of thing Riker would have done when he was younger.
Yeah, sure is.
He shuttled back to get laid.
So here's a completely philosophical question about a character that we don't know very much about, but I didn't put this in the notes because I wanted to hear your candid reactions. Why did Shaw get the 10th seat?
I saw it in the notes.
Oh, maybe I did put it in the notes, but I was trying to get a more candid reaction. Why did Shaw get the 10th seat?
Yeah, it's just random.
Yeah, that's what I think is random chance, and so that's he's got that would explain his survivor's guilt.
Oh yeah.
Because like he said, the lieutenant came down and just said you. So because they couldn't all decide, chances are that's what happened. Is the lieutenant was told go down and randomly select 10.
I was wondering if it was a comment as to how good an engineer he was, since we rely on his engineering expertise later in the episode. Because I mean, he says grease monkey to connect the two, but I also like the idea that like he doesn't think he was the best engineer on the ship, but they chose him because he was a good engineer.
Yeah, but it sounded like that happened earlier on in his career when he would have been like a lower level officer.
It had to be, because Wolf 359 is almost 40 years behind us in this time.
Yeah, so to me it would be, that's why I think it was just random chance, like a lieutenant being told, go pick 10, those 10 are going in the pod. And, you know, because that would explain, like I say, the survivor's guilt, because he has no real idea why he was chosen. Because he kind of implies he doesn't know why he was chosen.
Right.
Somebody named Not Applicable, that's a cool name.
I love your name. That's awesome. I have to read your comment now. It'd be interesting if they explored more of the Jean-Luc Beverly Jack Sr. relationship, such as when did Beverly and Jack meet? Flashback or short trek on it would also be cool.
Yes, it would.
It would indeed.
I agree. I would, you know what? If they did a short trek, or if they even did like a web exclusive or something that just gives us a chance to see the three of them together, I think even if they're all in their rocking chairs, like, and they just hire someone old looking to play old Jack, you know, that they're sitting around just talking about shit that happened when they were kids.
I have a completely off-topic, stupid question. Do you think
Please.
Jack Crusher survives in the mirror universe? I think so.
I would think so, yeah. Because a lot of the people who are dead in ours tend to be alive over there.
That's a conspiracy worth like something I would have come up with, Dustin. So I am impressed.
You've really got to start a YouTube channel of like Dell's conspiracies no one cares about or something.
You know, I thought about naming it opinions people care about, but I like Scott too much.
Thank you.
Delspiracies.
I like that too. We got a dead naming redemption.
We did.
We had a really good scene that explains to the, you know, the heteronormative why dead naming matters or why not dead naming matters. And, you know, I could deal.
It literally saved them.
I could skip the 2 men in 10 forward consoling each other and being physically close because I wrote that down as not representation. But I did feel like that explained from a very trans-friendly perspective why dead naming is so bad. I also like that when they shut off life support, that the computer didn't start screaming that they needed oxygen.
Right.
Because now I would understand why that would be silly, which is why it should have happened. Never mind. No one cares about that. Let's see. There are lots of things in my notes I think no one cares about.
I like at 7 when you mentioned the dead naming thing, when 7 literally makes a big point of saying, you know, out of respect, kind of like she's letting him know, I know you don't respect me enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I get more respect from LaForge than I do from you. What are you
What
doing?
do you think about using Sydney as the changeling for that scene?
Well, I think as
No
many
opinion.
times as we've seen her, it was perfectly set up for this. That we saw enough of her and, oh, hey, my dad's Geordie LaForge, like 3 times before this to set this one scene up. Because it was really annoying up until now, and it was nice payoff.
Yeah.
Nice payoff.
There was a meme about that. How do you know Sydney LaForge is, you know, the daughter of a decorated Starfleet officer? It's like she'll tell you 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
Or why is Sydney LaForge like a vegan? Because she'll let you know right away who her dad is.
I'm just hoping we get a conversation with her where she doesn't mention that her dad is Geordie LaForge.
Yeah,
Right.
That's getting a little awful.
Yeah, it's getting a little sickening. Like,
Well,
my
that's-
character has 2 dimensions, and one of them is that my dad has a cool name. Oh, wow. Thank
Okay.
you. Math is hard for me, so I never figure those things out. So thank you for pointing that out.
That's I think you're muted.
Why does 7 stop shooting the
There we
changeling? Why does 7 stop shooting the changeling and let it go
That's
into
a
the
great
air?
question.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the same question as last week with the Shrike when they had them with the portal weapon right in front of them and they could have tracked it or done anything they wanted to get Jack.
It'll end the
And they
story.
didn't. And and same thing this week where 7 like, oh, well, we need to let her kill the changeling later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we could also go with the fact that it's the first time she's really seen a changeling, so she's kind of like, what the?
So we're going to jump to the end because we're at that point. My question is Jack hallucinating or remembering?
I think it's some kind of psychic mental projection to him from something else. Because the words are like, find me, and what was the other phrase in that scene?
No, take it. No.
I can't remember.
It's the only quote I
there's two
didn't write down,
phrases.
probably.
But yeah, I was wondering if it's like a kind of a projection because we know certain empathic and telepathic species can project.
Yeah.
I mean, Loaxana Troy managed to, you know, set everyone off
Right.
in that one episode because she was unintentionally projecting.
And in this episode, we did get 2 of the Easter eggs at the end credits revealed to us. One of them is the image of the USS Constance, which is the ship that Bag of Dicks was on during Wolf 359. And Lord, what was I saying? They showed the holodeck loading 10 forward.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which I still think has a winky, sad face.
Could
I'm
just
sure
be
it's supposed to be
language.
coding, but like, it still bothers me.
Yeah, I used to code in Java, and you have to end like every line that you write with a semicolon. That's just the way the code is.
Conspiracy thought.
Okay, I love conspiracy thoughts.
What if the one controlling Vatic is Moriarty?
I was going to show up at
We've
some
talked about
point,
this
right?
before. I think the prime thing that was stolen from Daystrom Institute is either Moriarty, lore, or both.
Yeah, because Moriarty's in a cube, so it'd be easy enough to steal him. And if you don't really know what he's capable of, like I really want that like I said, I want a showdown between Lore and Moriarty, because theoretically he would be a match for Lore because he was a match for Data. Like have the two bad guys duke it out.
Yeah.
I think because this felt like the end of one story, I think Moriarty is going to be the star of his own story, and I also believe that Moriarty will be the star of his own story, like a story arc. I just think they might collide at some point. So
Right.
I don't think they're happening at the same time, but I think they're going to connect. That's my prediction at this point.
As long as it doesn't feel like we're just cleaning up after Picard's villains.
Yeah, right.
So we're at about time. Does anyone have any closing thoughts or things that I didn't bring up, or questions you're mad I skipped, or anything like that? I'm open to anything.
Well, let's do our ranking out of 10.
All right.
And, go through the questions, and maybe we'll ask a couple more at the end.
Okay.
Sure.
I struggled with rating this episode quite a bit. I kept vacillating anywhere between a 6 and a 9. I have ended on the lower end of that. I'm going to give it a 7. I was thinking 6.5, but I think I'm going to give it a 7. It has some really great scenes, some really great acting, but there are a lot of holes that aren't like supposed to be mysteries. And a glaring continuity error that they're gonna have to retcon at some point. And I think that's sort of where my 7 comes from. Scott, what do you think?
I'd actually go much higher. Hello.
Is that yours?
No, I think I would actually give this one a 9. I mean, I'm glad to see more character development for Vatic. You know, as Justin was saying, she's was way too one-dimensional before. Character development for Shaw, I'm actually kind of he's starting to grow on me. You know, hence the renaming. I loved the way they got out of this. Just so much technobabble, but it made sense. I love that they kind of they surfed their way out of trouble on the contractions of a nebula giving birth. You just can't beat that for my money. And and Picard and Jack, they got more time to connect. So yeah, I'll give you a 9. Eve?
I'm going to say probably about a 6.5 because this is moving too slowly for me.
Oh.
Let's get to it. We've been promised we're going to have all the cast coming back. We've been promised Moriarty and Lore. I don't want them to just be like a footnote, like I said, cleaning up after Picard's messes. I actually want to see something. Like, we've spent enough time on this Vatic thing. Like, can we move on now? And some of it just felt too tropey in a lot of ways. Like, there was a lot of tropes in this one. So I'm going to say 6.5. But with the thing that Shaw is going to be definitely one of those, you got to be grudgingly respect and like the guy, even if he's a bag of dicks.
Right.
Which he is.
Yeah.
You all set, Eve?
Go ahead, Doug.
I'm gonna actually go the lowest of everybody and go with a 6 here. Keep in mind that if I don't rank based on like IMDb 6 through 9 because like all of Star Trek is a 7 or an 8. I'm looking at it as all 800 episodes, and a 6 is still in the 300s. That's still pretty good out of 800 episodes.
Yeah.
I don't think it stacks up with the top of everything, and I feel like I'm almost giving this one a lot of discredit for the last 4 total, because my biggest problem is that we've just spent 40% of our season in this nebula explaining where the space jellyfish from one of the worst episodes of Star Trek come from.
In theory.
Otherwise, yeah, I'm here for Shaw, loving his development. I can't wait to get back to Raffi and Worf. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
We didn't leave the Titan this week. So, yeah, I like the pacing in the episodes themselves, but the pacing of the season, we're right back to the first 2 seasons of Picard and the weird pacing of the arc.
Yeah.
Any
I
other
do have one
questions?
question that we did miss that's been bugging me.
Yeah.
The very ending scene where Jack actually goes to meet Picard and he doesn't tell him who he is or anything. Why did Beverly not tell Jack that Picard didn't know about him? Because that could have made that scene play out way differently. And then there wouldn't be this whole resentment and stuff like that. Because of how he was just like, I never needed a family. I had Starfleet.
Yep.
Like, why did Beverly give him the information to contact him, but didn't say, oh, by the way, your dad doesn't know about you? That seems really strange, because most parents, if you're going to do that, you would say, your parent doesn't know about you, but here you go. Type, like, it doesn't make sense. That part's bothering me. What do you guys think?
I didn't really notice. Was there a line of dialogue about that? Because I missed it then.
Well, because Beverly never told Picard. We know she never told him that he had a son.
Yeah.
But at the very end, Jack comes in. Like, Jack is at the very end when Picard's with the cadets again. You see Jack at the end there, and he comes up to him and he says, you talk so much about your career and everything. What about family? Yep. And that's when Picard said,
what else have you done?
Yeah, and that's when Picard's like, I never needed anything else. I always had Starfleet. I didn't need family. Starfleet was family. And you see the disappointment on Jack's face.
Yeah, you do.
So it's kind of like...
I mean, that's almost Jack's fault. I mean, he's asking a question in the wrong medium. He's following up a group of cadets where Picard wants to give them that hopeful, Starfleet's your family now.
Yeah.
But you know that if he knew who he was talking to, and in that context, he would have that conversation much differently.
But why did Beverly not tell Jack? That's what I'm wondering. Like, she should have. She should have told Jack that his dad didn't know who he was.
Yeah, just lump that into the rest of the stuff of why Beverly Crusher is a terrible parent. Not as bad as some of the rest of the franchise parents, but not great. Not at all.
I'm starting to agree with Dustin too that like I had it. You just said it, and I forgot.
Beverly Crusher
being a bad parent.
And not as bad.
It'll come to me when we're done. I have one more thing I wanted to bring up. If we've got a little bit of extra time,
do it.
I was watching this episode and I kept going like, this sounds familiar. Like all of these plot points feel recycled. And so I went and remembered that the search term I was looking for was Soliton Wave or Soliton Wave. Mm-hmm. There's 2 episodes in TNG where they ride an energy wave in order to not use warp, or because they couldn't use warp. And they were both Soliton waves. It's spelled that way. But in particular, in season 5, episode 10, which is called Newgrounds, we have that plot, but the A plot is about Worf being a parent, because this is when his mom shows up and says, we're like 100. Get this little kid out of our house. And so I felt like that had, like, if this episode were written for TNG in the TNG era, it would have been Newgrounds. Like, because everything is brighter and everything is more obvious. Like where the plot is kind of going to go to some degree. And the focus on the father-son relationship being adversarial. Like it was on and on. I was just kept going like, I've heard all of this before. So that was one of the things that I thought of when I was, and I actually went back and watched Newgrounds to make sure I wasn't wrong. Like last week when I was very wrong.
Happens.
Anyone else?
I will say I did make one weird connection because my brain makes weird connections. Them being birthed out of the space nebula. And the first episode I thought of was the one where they end up, the Enterprise gives birth to its own life form.
Oh, yeah. And season 7.
That weird nonsense episode.
Yeah.
I was thinking that for a little bit. I'm like, please tell me this isn't, the Enterprise is going to give, or the Titan's going to give birth to something.
And now I remember that butt that we're going to get back to. The thing that I did not like about Riker in this episode.
Okay.
That he's not willing to take the big chances. He's not willing to try the things, even though they've made a career out of trying weird stuff to get out of stupid situations. And he's just like, yeah, we're going to wait for rescue. What?
Yeah,
it
even
didn't feel
Beverly.
like Riker at that moment.
Yeah, like that's what I was trying to say. Like, even Beverly said, do what we do best. Well, what they do best is take crazy chances. And Riker was always one who was, let's take those chances. Like we saw him in Lower Decks. He was the swashbuckling, out of my way, hell yeah, here I come. And it's kind of like, okay, I get he's had to deal with the passing of his son and stuff. But at the same time, that shouldn't be, it shouldn't bring him down to the point where he's not wanting to take any chances to get back home. Because, he tries to tries to make that letter at the end.
I had a note about the letter, but I didn't bring it up. Can they write one letter? Because we've seen about 56 characters or 47 characters have to record, I'm going to die now, so here are my inner thoughts so that the audience can know what my inner thoughts are about what's going on.
Right.
I'm a little tired of that. I'm also questioning why if a real jellyfish has contractions, like it just seemed weird to me. But that's just me. I will, if jellyfish have contractions, put it in the comments.
Nice idea.
Of all the things I could sit and wonder about at night, do jellyfish have contractions?
These are the things you guys come up with, like really cool plot points, and I'm thinking, do jellyfish have contractions?
Don't worry, I was sitting there going, please don't let this be, another spaceship giving birth to a space baby.
Somebody in the audience right now is Googling it.
I know, I'm sure. My notes fell. Someone tell a joke and I'll make sure I covered everything I wanted to cover. Tell a joke, talk about a thing. Talk about the fact that Riker and Picard, when they're in the ready room, Riker refers to Picard as Admiral, but when they're on the bridge, he does not.
Because when they were in the ready room, he was apologizing to Picard. So he would have used Admiral there to be like, okay, you were right, I was wrong. This is me coming hat in hand, which to me, I appreciated that because a captain should be able to admit when they're wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that part about Riker I liked was that he's lost some of the arrogance that he used to have. And he comes hat in hand essentially and like, yeah, you were right. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Admiral. It felt like it was more of a sincere apology. Whereas when he's on the bridge, I think he defaults back to the fact that they're more friends.
Yep.
Because at this point, how long has Picard been out of the fleet?
Yeah.
I remembered what I agreed, but slightly differently with Dustin about. Dustin is tired of the Jack, Beverly, Picard drama.
I am too.
I am very tired of talking about Thad.
Yes.
I am rolling my eyes when he comes up now. I'm like, I get it. Riker's in grief over something that happened a million years ago. He's getting all of this stuff pulled up because now they can use positronic tech, and Picard has a son, and that brings it up. But like, he's talked about it already. Can we please move on? Unless unless Dad is going to show up at some point, I don't care.
No, I get you. It's getting a little bit annoying.
I'm on the other side of that. You can do a flashback and show me how the kid died. You can show me putting him in the hole. I'd rather see that than hear any more about Picard and his kid.
Last minute thoughts.
I only got one. So it was nagging at me when I was watching the episode, and they were talking about Picard needing to steer the ship manually out of an asteroid field. And the only thing I could think of was, what was the name of the episode of TNG where he literally did that? Because I remember him standing there at the helm, like doing the whole thing. Huh?
Booby Trap.
Okay, thank you. That's all I needed.
For me, my brain went straight to Han Solo in Star Wars.
Jack definitely has Han Solo vibes.
He does. Like I say, though, I'm still half expecting him to like stab somebody to death and frame someone for the murder because of the other show he's in. So,
Dustin, any last thoughts?
Nope.
Then all that's left to do is to thank people for coming and hanging out with us today. I hope you got as much enjoyment as we did out of this. Please leave a like, because that's how we know that we're being entertaining. And if you subscribe, Dustin makes awesome videos about Star Trek, and he's currently ranking every Star Trek episode from the worst to the very best. And I have not asked him what his number one is yet, because I want to be surprised.
I'm going to tell you what my number one is till it comes out. But the show resumes after 2 months on hiatus tomorrow.
Yes.
Excellent. And does anyone else have a last minute plug before we log off? All right. Thank everyone for coming. Leave a comment, make a like. If you're not already, subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Live long and prosper. I'm not good at it. Just why I don't